Descent of the Demon God. By Hanjo Wiolia. Chapter 220. Cho Yashin. Part 1.
Huang Heol, one of the 4 elders of the Blade God's 6 martial clan, and one of the most trusted servants of the Blade God. He was the one who helped the Blade God after they fought against Ark Wui and Chun Yoan.
Weak. The man wearing a red mask walking along the road was covered in flames. He was hiding his face, but Huang Heol was certain. It's him. Around 350 years ago, a monster-like old man took the Emogi's corpse, its blood, and the life of Huang Heol's beloved lady. Huang Heol was convinced after fighting for more than a dozen seconds. You. Huang Heol groaned as he took off his clothes. He was the one who reacted quickly to the unexpected presence. The corpses of their clan members were piled into the buses so they could move and defend their hidden base. You have gotten pretty strong. He. At that time, even the 3 of you couldn't handle this old man's attacks. Huang Heol frowned at the voice. The voice sounded like it was from a young man. It's different. Huang Heol still remembered the voice, despite the years passed, due to his hatred for the old man. Then who's this voice? You, who are you? You forgot about this old man already? The red-masked man threw the blade at Huang Heol. Shoo! The flying blade moved on its own, it was an air sword. Huh! Huang Heol moved his upper body towards the sword, slowly evaded it, and hit the middle of the blade. Cha-cha-cha! The crossing blades began to break into fragments and flew at the masked man. It was a high-level technique in which each fragment of the blade was loaded with energy. It might seem like a simple technique, but the fragments of the blade were all aimed at the red-masked man. Hoo. The masked man lifted his palm up and then lowered it. Then flying fragments fell to the ground as if the gravity rose. The previous blade has been broken. Don't act like that for a stolen blade. One of those that tumbled out of the bus was the broken blade. Huang Heol's eyes looked at the red-masked man. The voice was youthful, and the martial arts talents were something he encountered from the old man he met 350 years ago in Chun Yoan. Did he go through a body transformation? That seemed most likely. However, it didn't matter if the elderly man got younger or anything. He was still the man who had murdered his lover in front of him. Fat. As Huang Heol extended his hand, the ground began to tremble, and the road cracked and rose up into sharp shards. Pop-a-pack. The attack was being made with the energies of the spirit beasts. However, the red-masked man only laughed at him. Thud. He stepped ahead, then the stones on the floor that was about to attack him dispersed. Your blade energy is weak. You should use it this way. The masked man stepped onto the floor. Thud. At the same time, he reached out to Huang Heol. Then the stones on the floor tried to lock him in from east, west, north, and south as if a giant beast was about to eat him. Weak. However, since the stones were engulfed in fire, the heat felt like it was lava. It didn't end there. Blue sparks rose in the air, and tremendous lightning struck them. How is he dealing with the 5 spirit beasts' energy this way? Aside from anger, Huang Heol admired his opponent's power. Unlike himself, who dealt with the energy as an auxiliary, the man with a red mask was able to handle it skillfully. However, hazy invisible energy rose to form a blade from Huang Heol's hand. He grabbed it with both hands and then lowered it to the floor with force. Bang! Ah! Kwa. The energy of the invisible blade that had sunk into the ground spread out in 8 directions, tearing away the stone walls that had been heated like lava pressing around them. It was the 8 Xian blade technique. Bang! Meanwhile, lightning hit him from above. However, it just looked like it since he had vanished and reappeared in front of the masked man. Shoo! Huang Heol used the fifth technique with an invisible blade. It was the extreme fast slashing blade that unfolded with the footwork. Slash. Huang Heol's invisible blade tried to cut off the masked man's neck. However, the man in front of him managed to avoid the invisible blade at a tremendous speed. He avoided this? In that state, he extended his fist to Huang Heol's chest, and Huang Heol somersaulted one to the back. Quack Wang. However, the fist had extended several tens of meters, making the road a mess. If it had been a little later, Huang Heol would have been swept away. Quack. He tried to avoid it, but his back was hurting due to his aging body. As if noticing this, the red-masked man reached out with his blade and attempted to strike him. Shoo! An invisible blade tried to pierce Huang Heol. Huh! He used an invisible blade as a shield despite the disheveled form. Quang! There was a tearing sensation as if the invisible blades were being torn. What is this energy? That was what it seemed like. Pang! Quack! Huang Heol's body bounced back as if a cannonball-like force had hit him. However, he was a veteran. In that brief moment of flight, the blade was drawn towards the man wearing a red mask. Then, quack! The red-masked man holding out the blade was pushed 5 steps back. What seemed like blood flowed through the cracks behind the red mask. CAK. The red-masked man clutched his chest briefly because Huang Heol used heart blade. Good. To make this old man bleed. JJJKKKK. A sharp sense flowed from the bottom of the red-masked man, and then the floor cracked in all directions. The heart blade energy inside him was discharged out of his body. Crack. Meanwhile, Huang Heol bounced back and used an invisible blade to stop himself from going further away. He looked tired. What a fight. GM So Ryong, who was watching this, bit his tongue. It was indeed a battle of the bests. But there were differences. Huang Heol was battling this hard for the first time since the battle with Demon God. Now I understand why the Elder was wary of MS Group. Who would have guessed they were hiding in MS? GM So Ryong tried to turn on his smartphone. However, the smartphone's battery was drained. Damn it. All the smartphones were turned off when the red-masked man appeared, and it seemed like an EMP was used. It was deliberately done to avoid contact with the outside world. If only I can contact Demon God. He sincerely hoped for that. GM So Ryong suddenly remembered something as he looked at the red-masked man with anxious eyes. They have a special phone with an EMP sensor, developed by Blade 6 research team. Was it on the third bus? GM So Ryong looked around to find the third bus. Many buses were overturned and were on fire, so he hoped this one bus was safe. At that moment, he found something. Ah! It was the third bus cut in half, and unlike other buses, it wasn't on fire, which meant the phone had to be safe. GM So Ryong looked at the red-masked man. With his own abilities, he couldn't block the attacks. I have to aim when the Elder is fighting. To not get his attention, GM So Ryong reduced his presence, covered himself in the soot, and looked for a chance. As if not noticing, the red-masked one approached Huang Heol. And the red-masked man said, "You kept hiding, didn't you? Then you should have just held on to your life. That old bitch who gave up her life to make sure to save you is now thrown into waste." Huang Heol's face contorted at it. Ma Huyan. Her last moment came to his mind. The bloody sacrifice he had to see. He shouted in rage. "You bastard! Come on!" Eyes shining in red could be seen through the mask. The eyes were clearly showing excitement. The masked man was definitely enjoying the battle after a long time. Huang. The 5 spirit beasts' energy was gathered in Huang Heol's hand that held the invisible blade. It was the greatest marvel that individuals who had attained the heavenly realm could unfold. Right. Allow this old man to enjoy this fight more. The red-masked man walked towards him, and Huang Heol shouted, "This will be the tune for the both of us." Huang Heol was ready to throw his life away. It was only for this moment that he endured the harsh life. Huyan, I will take him to the underworld. In that way, at least, he can face his woman with a proud smile. Huang Heol gathered all the spirit energy into his hand, and then, shoo! The red-masked man, who was walking, stretched out his hand somewhere. At that moment, a loud explosion came. Huang! It was a bus that exploded. Then he saw the figure of GM Songriyong going close to the bus had bounced back. GM Songriyong looked around, shocked. "Don't do anything useless, kid." At the words of the red-masked man, GM Songriyong's face turned desperate. He thought they wouldn't notice, but the man was aware. There was no way he could move now. It's over. GM Songriyong bowed his head. There was no longer any way to contact the outside world. Maybe today will be the day when the Blade God 6 martial clan comes to an end. Then how about we end it? Whoa! Around the red-masked man, 5 colors began to shine, making a shocking thing happen. The spirit energy was turned into a weapon. This old man will show you blade dance. What an overwhelming force! Huang Heol's eyes shook as he watched the opponent be better than him with the 5 spirit beasts' energy. How can this? As he grew, so did the monster. His mind, thinking of dying and taking the man with him, was confused. However, the red-masked man stopped approaching him. Tack. Then the red-masked man mumbled. This guy. The weapon with the spirit energy that floated around the red-masked man disappeared, and then he flew up. When he suddenly left, Huang Heol was speechless. Why? In a stone mountain in the desert about 110 kilometers away from Chengdu City, numerous corpses were scattered throughout the enormous hidden basement inside it. Someone in a black suit was leisurely walking among the numerous corpses. It was Chen Youan. Emergency! 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 Warning tones constantly sounded through the basement speaker. Chapter 221. Cho Yashin. Part 2. Just 20 minutes ago. When Blade 6 Chairman GM Songriyong didn't answer the phone despite several calls, Bai Maqian was worried. He didn't answer? Something seems to have gone wrong. Chen Youan began to think from then on. GM Songriyong had called saying that he had an urgent matter, despite Blade 6 having strong warriors, and Huang Heol as well. An enemy Huang Heol couldn't face. That was the most likely situation. If Huang Heol couldn't deal with the enemy, that meant that the main power behind MS had moved and that Blade 6 had touched something that made MS move. So they found it. Chen Youan was sure that Blade 6 must have found the headquarters of MS Group. Maqian. Yes, Lord Chen Ma? Where was the last coordinate sent by Blade 6? Chen Youan checked the coordinates of the last place that Blade 6 sent. In Blade 6's report, they said that they had found what they assumed to be the base. Recognizing Chen Youan's intention, Bai Maqian spoke. I will check for the location based on their navigation path. He selected a total of 3 places. Unlike Blade 6, who moved one by one to scout, Chen Youan could search an entire area with his spatial movement. He quickly found a base on the second place that Bai Maqian had selected, the Stone Mountain. This base's strict security system, which was incomparable to that of other bases, convinced Chen Youan and Bai Maqian that this was MS Group's main base. Everything developed by MS was being revealed from genetic humans to combat weapons. There were only a few hundred people near the entrance. Bang! Bang! Quack! Ack! However, Chen Yuan was too strong for them to handle. Chen Yuan walked in a straight line and dealt with the enemies without even lifting a hand. Before people could even come close, their heads would explode or be crushed down. Emergency! 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 A warning sound blared, signaling that the base's main system was aware that a mighty enemy had arrived. Numerous CCTV screens in the base illuminated the presence of a single person. Of course, it was none other than Chen Yuan. The fourth sector has been breached. 50% of the genetically mutated biological weapons have been mobilized to stop the intruder. The fifth sector has been breached. 40% of the bodily modified weapons have been mobilized to stop the intruder. Chen Yuan broke through the sectors at high speeds. His actions had no strategy or plan. Who would attempt to break into an enemy camp without a plan? Well, Chen Yuan was undeniably arrogant and strong, and his madness was evident. Bang! On the CCTV screen, Chen Yuan was seen killing people without lifting a hand. Genetically mutated weapons and bodily modified weapons continued to pour in to stop him, but they would die before they could even get within 30 meters of his location. Pick. A map appeared on one of the screens, showing a red, moving at high speed. Although it was moving incredibly fast, it would take another 15 minutes to reach where the map was located. With this force, it would take less than 3 minutes for Chen Yuan to reach the center. Something was typed into the black screen, which seemed like the main terminal. Temporary sequence has been entered, changed to protect the base. Main sequence number 1932. Transferring the recorded brain information to tubes 01, 02, 03, 04, 05, 06, 07, 08, brain, and body of the test. Whoa! Computers could be heard working together. Before long, tubes containing a mysterious liquid moved as humans began to form inside them. DRRR. Upload, 60% complete. Upload, 70% complete. Upload, 80% complete. Cha-cha-cha. While the upload was in progress, the glass tubes labeled 02, 05 and 08 broke, and a human sprung out from the broken glass. Its head, however, looked like a broken watermelon. Tubes 02, 05, and 08 failed to have the information uploaded to the brain. Upload, 90% complete. Upload, 100% complete. When the message said that the upload was complete, the body in the main glass tube, which was convulsing, stopped. A drain pipe opened at the bottom of the main glass tube and drained it of the fluids. Once the liquid was drained, the glass tube opened. Clank! As the glass tube opened, air flowed in, and the device that looked like a helmet was released. 5 hairless, humanoid beings came out. Cough. Cough. They coughed, as it was hard to breathe, because they had just gotten up. Nonetheless, their breathing quickly stabilized. Wing. Monitor screens rose from the floor and stopped in front of the 5 humanoid beings. A man with a mask that had a visibly engraved letter on his face was seen on the monitor. A voice came out of the speaker and spoke to the 5 at the same time. First, I would like to apologize that the plan went a little off. With the data transferred, you have to block the incoming man until the main man arrives. In response, the 5 beings adopted an absurd expression. Main man? Meanwhile, Chen Yuan was passing through a sector called Sector 8. Numerous people jumped to intercept him and used many techniques to stop Chen Yuan, but he was still taking them down without using his hands. He was completely unmatched in power. Chen Yuan was actually able to reach the center much more quickly, but he decided to slow down and take care of the people for 2 reasons. The first reason was to remove all the power and development within MS, and the second was to distract the enemies from Blade 6, who seemed to be facing trouble. I seem to be destroying the base rather quickly. In the current state, it seemed like Chen Yuan wasn't facing many difficulties as he breezed through the base. However, Chen Yuan's eyes noticed something strange as he was moving. They're moving away. The enemies that had been running towards him previously were now backing out, as if someone strong was coming for backup. Chen Yuan detected numerous beings with weird killing intents approaching him. Are they coming now? However, something was strange. Those approaching him seemed to have similar energy. Chen Yuan held out his hand. Whoa! Hundreds of air swords formed as Chen Yuan grabbed onto one of them with his hand and directed the rest ahead. Swoosh! The swords, which filled the hall, moved to the new enemies, but a red flash appeared from afar as the air swords suddenly disappeared. Huh! The beings who got rid of the air swords flew in at an incredible speed. They were naked, muscular, and had no hair at all. Chen Yuan felt intrigued by their entrance into the battle and held out his hand. Then, crack! The space distorted, twisting in front of them as they approached him. The reckless ones who continued to run at the forefront, ignorant of his spatial attack, were swept into the space. Quack! Thanks to that, the other ones decided to withdraw. Their desperate response was to break through the wall, ceiling, or even underground. They were doing anything to get away from the twisted space, which was the right choice. Bang! Immediately, the ceiling above Chen Yuan was pierced as one of the beings approached Chen Yuan. His eyes shone. This is? It was Shaolin Temple's chained God kick technique, which was performed so skillfully and perfectly that it looked like a Shaolin monk had appeared. Chen Yuan blocked the attack with one hand. Pop a pack! At that moment, two of the humanoids appeared on either side. Chen Yuan intently looked at the martial arts they performed. The technique that the being to his right performed was none other than the 5 Demon Faces technique, which belonged to a clan under the Sky Demon Order. An evil sect's martial arts? The being to his left was using the technique of a sect under the forces of evil. These beings seemed to be using the most potent martial arts and performing them perfectly without any gaps. Pop-pop-pack. Of course, normal warriors would be flustered by their sudden and coordinated attacks, but those beings were dealing with the strongest being on Earth. Chen Yuan moved forward with one hand behind his back. Bang! At that moment, a crack formed on the floor, causing fragments to bounce in all directions. Cha-cha-cha. Should I imbue the fragments with sword energy? Chen Yuan decided to try it out. His planning became even more complicated. Each of their blood points needs to be targeted. The fragments weren't just loaded with sword energy, but were being controlled very cleverly. Pop-pack. Ultimately, Chen Yuan used the fragments to hit 3 of the humanoids, and those 3 were thrown back and hit the wall, while the one coming from the ceiling was blown up. Chen Yuan mumbled, did he avoid it? Thud. When Chen Yuan took a step forward, the floor cracked open as a being from under the ground came up. The being was trying to aim for Chen Yuan from below, but he had managed to move in time. Shoo! When Chen Yuan held out his hand, 3 invisible swords formed in the air. Seeing the invisible sword, the being held a blade with both hands and raised it. However, as the swords moved, the being with a blade mumbled, "You did something stupid." Puck. One of the invisible swords pierced the being's head, and the remaining swords went for its heart and stomach. The being seemed dead, but Chen Yuan's eyes caught something. Drip. The damaged bodies of the beings were rapidly recovering, but that wasn't what shocked Chen Yuan. Blue blood? There was blue blood dripping from the beings that had been stabbed. It was strange that they had no hair, could use martial arts, and even had blood that wasn't red. Chen Yuan reached out to the dead one. Pack. He turned the body over onto its back. Something was protruding on its side where wing bones were located on the being's back. Chen Yuan looked at the strange form curiously when one of the regenerated beings used sword energy against Chen Yuan. Cha-cha-cha. A white light condensed on its hand, similar to the way that martial artists used sword energy, but it was slightly different. Chen Yuan used sword energy against the being's attack to stop it. Cha-cha-chong. Blue sparks flashed. Chen Yuan narrowed his eyes. No internal energy. Chen Yuan subtly felt something strange, and when he clashed with the being, he became aware that the being could use martial arts without having any internal energy. Cha-chong. The being unfolded two strong techniques at a highly skilled level, but its techniques weren't just any techniques, they were the best techniques from the Wudong clan and the Mount Hua clan, and it was unfolding them simultaneously. What's this? It was the first time Chen Yuan ever saw anyone perform two different techniques at the same time. Chen Yuan had to learn all the martial arts with the nanos, but this being seemed to be different. It wasn't just this being, but other ones also seemed to have the same capabilities. Even if they aren't martial artists, they keep changing their techniques and don't seem flustered when blocked. Since Chen Yuan knew the techniques, he knew where to look for gaps. At that moment, Chen Yuan grabbed the wrist of a being that was in the middle of changing techniques. Pack. Growling. The being raised the energy in its body, but that wasn't enough to shake off Chen Yuan. Chen Yuan opened his mouth and said, "You guys must be hiding a lot." At Chen Yuan's question, the being smiled and said, "We aren't hiding anything. With this body, we've reached our limit." This body? Chen Yuan was puzzled. It seemed that this wasn't its original body. What do you mean? If it weren't for this body, this would have been a fun fight with you, demon god. It is a pity that my role is small. Goo. At that moment, Chen Yuan sensed a strong presence at the end of the passage he was passing through. An intense energy approached, trying to overthrow everything with killing intent. The smell of blood all around hurt Chen Yuan's nose. Step. Step. A being with a blood-red mask and blood-stained body walked in. Looking at the newcomer, the cop being seemed to like his smell of blood. You must have enjoyed it. Well, it's me. The red-masked man said, looking at the being. The being responded with a bitter voice. I didn't know this would be such a time-consuming role, but clean this up, main body. The man in the red mask nodded. Good work. Now, let this old man take charge. Fat. At that moment, another being flew towards Chen Yuan, who lightly flicked his finger behind him without watching. Pang. Quack. The being flew back while screaming in pain. There was a noticeable hole in its chest as it flew back. Huang. The being that had its wrist held seemed surprised by the outcome of the sudden attack. Yuan looked at the red-masked man and said with a smile, "Do you people really think you were able to stall for time?" Chapter 222. Cho Yashin. Part 3. He was the one acting. The surprise was brief. The reckless being returned to his original form and shook his head. Then, he said to Chen Yuan, "Looks like you did what you intended, demon god. You definitely succeeded in getting attention." Thanks to this, Huang Heo and GM Soryong, the last of Blade 6, survived. However, the being didn't have regrets. Instead, he smiled. But you made a mistake of gathering all your enemies into one place. Well, this is a one-time chance. Chen Yuan seemed relaxed, and the being spoke. We know your strength, but do you know of us? Something flew towards Chen Yuan's head as soon as the words were finished. It was the energy sword of the 5 spirit beasts. 5 spirit beasts' energy sword? This meant that his opponent reached the heavenly master level. The sword flying in intends to pierce Chen Yuan's head, but Chen Yuan would not let that happen. Whoa! His own 5 spirit beasts' energy sword appeared like a shield. Pang! Quackwang! A powerful wave was created when the two collided, and the basement sank 50 meters below ground. Nature's energy imbues the five spirit beasts' energy sword. It was something more powerful than the invisible sword. As expected, it's fast. The being stuck his tongue at the speed of Chen Yuan, controlling his sword. And then he decided to play his part even though his body was controlled by internal energy. The self-destruct has been activated. Goo. The entire body of the being was dyed in red and heat sword. Chen Yuan, who held the wrist, began to use ice chi. JJKKK. The being froze before he could explode. He was shocked that his self-destruction was stopped. Fat. At that moment, the red-masked man appeared in front of Chen Yuan and tried to attack with his fist, and Chen Yuan responded in the same way. Fat. As they collided, they bounced off by force. Kwang. Chen Yuan's eyes widened in surprise as they collided and moved backward simultaneously. It was because the power of the red-masked man was stronger than what he expected. The energy he used in his fist was to block, but given how far back his weapon had moved, his enemy had to be more powerful than demons. Thud. The red-masked man came out of the crumbling wall and tried to relax his neck muscles. Pack. The red-masked man took off his mask and threw it to the floor. Seeing that, Chen Yuan narrowed his eyes. Seogi? He had the same face as Seogi, the heavenly killing star. Chen Yuan remembered the clones of Seogi he saw in MS Hidden Base. Are you a clone too? At his question, the man with Seogi's face laughed. Hoo. He was laughing like an old man. It was natural, but the voice didn't match the body. The man looked at Chen Yuan and said, "Unfortunately, you are wrong. I am the original." Original? Well, I really wanted to see you. That was why this old man put so much effort into raising that child. Raising? Hearing those words, memories flashed through Chen Yuan's mind. Seogi talked of another person like him. And he heard of it from the Yun Jerem about a warrior who lived for long being related to MS Group. With that, Chen Yuan guessed who this was. Cho Yashin. Ho. You are the old man who raised Seogi. Do you know me? This man, Cho Yashin, seemed surprised. There were very few people who knew about him, even in the Yun Jerem. However, Cho Yashin never controlled information about him. Living for so long, he knew the information was bound to come out. Step. Chen Yuan stepped ahead and said, "If you are the original, why did you make clones similar to you? Were you trying to mess with the world?" Mess the world? Ha ha ha. Cho Yashin laughed as if that was absurd. Then he continued. If that was the purpose, the old man would have stepped ahead right away. Wouldn't I have? The killing intent from the words of Cho Yashin went beyond the ordinary. The killing intent was as if he resented everything about the world. Chen Yuan couldn't understand how the man could still smile with so much killing intent. Humans are truly fragile creatures. Even though there are numerous developments, it is finite like a flower which will eventually fall into darkness. He seemed skeptical of the human lifespan. Then, Cho Yashin continued. Where in the world is this foolish body, which dies no matter how powerful it becomes? Chen Yuan frowned at those words. At first, he thought the purpose of the clones was to increase crazy people like him, to create a group of them. But listening to it, it seemed what the man wanted was eternal life. But what did that have to do with making clones? Suddenly, Chen Yuan thought of Cho Yashin's conversation with the other being. It's me. I didn't think this would be so time-consuming, but please clean up, main body. You did well. Now, let this old man take charge. Cho Yashin called himself original, and Chen Yuan thought so. He can clone himself and not just the body? The answer was given by Nano. It isn't impossible. It is possible if it has the technology to transfer the forebrain, which has converted all the memory information of the brain to data and into another body. It is not a complex technology in the environment in which Nano was created. The technology, however, was legally prohibited. A soul's existence was controversial at the time. Nonetheless, there was a general belief that just copying memory does not contain a person's soul, but rather simply breaths memories into a body. Just because they had the technology, it didn't mean it could be done. Chen Yuan shook his head. You are crazier than I thought. Do you want to covet eternal life? In the end, the clones were created to extend his lifespan. Chen Yuan had an open mind more than others, but he had contempt for those who thought like Cho Yashin. At Chen Yuan's words, Cho Yashin laughed and said, "Do you know how big this old man's will is?" Big in what way? Eternal life? It is just an addition. Addition? How nonsense. I seek nothing but perfection. Even if there is a perfect mind and the body doesn't follow, it is meaningless. Goo. Whoa. As soon as he said that, the energy around Cho Yashin increased rapidly, and hundreds of weapons with the 5 spirit beasts' energy were created. Chen Yuan's eye narrowed at it. A perfect heavenly master level. Taking in the course of the beasts. If this was the case, it indicated that this individual had no internal energy constraints. Cho Yashin smiled. Such unfortunate times. I had a regret after hearing the story that the second Chen Ma destroyed the one who managed to defeat this old man. Finally, I can relive that regret. Fat. Then Cho Yashin moves toward Chen Yuan while 100 of the weapons are ready to move. Try handling the 100 blades. Cho Yashin waved his hand, and the blades around the area unfolded techniques showing how expert the one handling them was. Swish. Even Chen Yuan felt amazed. He can handle all 100 of them? Chen Yuan could do that because of Nano's help. However, Cho Yashin could do it with pure talent and effort alone. What was more was that each blade was moving in the best way possible. How to stop it? This man was aware of the abilities of Chen Yuan. That was why he was confident that he wouldn't lose to him. At that moment, Chen Yuan raised his hand. And then... crack! The space in all directions twisted with intense energy flowing out. The space itself moved like a sword. Cho Yashin's eyes twinkled at it. As expected, he can handle space. He watched it from afar, but seeing it in person was very different. Cha-cha-cha. The blades that held such strong power collided with the twisted space and were shattered. Even Huang He's blades could work against him. As his blades disappeared, Chen Yuan walked toward him. There is no need to be that shocked. I was convinced that the Heavenly Master level wasn't the end, but seeing it in front of my eyes made it clear. At those words, Chen Yuan narrowed his eyes. Even though the opponent he is facing is overpowering him, he still seems excited. It's as if he wanted to also use the space sword. Thank you because you've shown the old man the way. You are overconfident. Do you think you will survive here? At Chen Yuan's words, Cho Yashin smiled. You made the mistake of coming here. Shoo. Chen Yuan, who thought that something was up, reached out to his enemy. Sharp anticipation sprang out and twisted the space, then surrounded Cho Yashin. It was then. Pop a pack. The anticipation aiming for Cho Yashin turned at once, and Nano said, "The vector values and direction have been forcibly adjusted." What? His attacks were moving and destroying the base, but not the target. Chen Yuan frowned at the strange power which even affected his space. Cho Yashin smiled. You are late, B. At that moment, the place where Cho Yashin was standing opened, and something like an elevator came out. Someone appeared wearing a silver mask with a letter B mark on it. A B mask. He is one of the 10 executives of the MS group that was the closest to the commander. Most of the executives have died at the hands of Chen Youwen, but 1 or 2 of them weren't found. Sorry. It took me some time. It does not matter since you came when it mattered. Now, A voice was heard at Cho Yashin's cry. EV will operate in the industrial field. Whoa! At that moment, energy beyond imagination surged from the base. What is this? Chen Youwen looked at the floor. The moment different energy was released, the energy around and the one in Chen Youwen's body scattered. The acetic acid Hulse system and the wide EV field have been successfully activated. The altered voice of A said from the speaker. Then Cho Yashin smiled. You entered your grave. You prepared a lot. It will be different from what you experienced outside. Being in the base is real perfection. He could feel it. The energy flowing from the bottom of the base was so intense that it couldn't be compared to the one Murim association used. You guys must be the same. Everyone was in the same position. At that, the person wearing a B mask, who is also presumed to be called B, flicked his fingers. Crack! The ceiling around Chen Youwen collapsed and fell around him. Ukukuku. To be precise, it was everywhere except for where Chen Youwen stood. The person wearing a B mask saw an energy device emitting a blue magnetic field attached to Cho Yashin's chest. This has nothing to do with us. The device was made for the abilities to be used. Cho Yashin tapped B's shoulder and said, even without this kind of thing, this friend and this old man have the strongest abilities that are enough to defeat you. But you see, a tiger should do its best even when hunting a rabbit one. Cho Yashin considered B to be someone with the strongest ability. Come to think of it, H, who was now one of Chen Youwen's subordinates, said something. I heard that one of 2, B or C are the most powerful. He didn't know their abilities, but what was certain was that when it unfolds, Chen Youwen's space sword is made to change directions. Then, as Nano said, he could manipulate the vector values or directions. Then, the man had to really be the strongest. Talk. Talk. Something like water dripped. Cho Yashin turned and looked at B. There was blood dripping from B's chin. He overdid it. Cho Yashin bit his tongue. B's brain must be overloaded. He thought it would be daunting to use his ability that warps space, but he couldn't fight Chen Youwen alone. B bleed with just one attempt. It doesn't matter. If B controls the vector value once or twice and blocks the attacks, the old man can kill him. In that fleeting moment, he could end it. The result is obvious. Now, Chen Youwen was caught in their trap and could do nothing. Even if he forced himself to get past the system and try to do something, he could never defeat the 2 of them. Then a voice from the speaker was heard. He could be a test subject with the best conditions. Catch him, Cho Yashin. Even if you didn't say it, I would do it. The body of Demon God, known to be the strongest on Earth, was what they wanted the most. Step. Cho Yashin walked toward Chen Youwen. The magnetic field device on his chest made it possible for him to use his internal energy, but it was still challenging to use the 5 spirit beasts' energy sword. Perhaps, the only space B could control was in this area, so his space to attack was limited. Maybe, we should just be prepared to stop him. It couldn't be figured out for sure. Cho Yashin smiled and said to Chen Youwen, who was silent. It isn't the strong one who overcomes things, but the one who overcomes is the strong one. Demon God. At that moment, Chen Youwen looked at them and said, Can a will be defined as a vector? Hearing that, Cho Yashin was puzzled for a second, then he shouted nervously as he realized something. A. Let B get down, dash it was then. Quack. B grabbed his chest. Blood gushed out from the cracks of the mask. W, what is this? Then he fell down. Thud. Heart sword. Cho Yashin grunted. He thought he had calculated everything, but he was wrong. The heart sword is the power of the user's will. Even if he could control the vectors, his ability could not do much when it came to the sword made by the user's will. He should not live. I will kill him. Cho Yashin thought it was a problem they could not control. The monster that could open his path with the slightest gap, Chen Yuan. Then Chen Yuan held out his hand. It is impossible. No matter how much you go beyond the Heavenly Master level, in this area. Before he could even finish speaking, Chen Yuan moved his hand up as if lifting something. Cho Yashin didn't know what his opponent was doing. It was trying to force his internal energy to flow. I said it is impossible. Growling. The Earth's axis shook violently. Hun? JJJKKKK. Crack. The entire base was destroyed. The vibration was so strong that the whole ground and walls cracked. It was shaking severely that they couldn't stand. What? Even A's voice came from the speaker. How can this? Cho Yashin couldn't understand. What happened? The entire base is rising. It was something one wouldn't know if they were inside. This massive earthquake was happening because the base of MS Group was rising. Outside, the entire mountain was rising, and something unbelievable happened. Chen Yuan spoke to Cho Yashin. Your trap is too small.